I knew I'd have to sign it up for the draft on my 18th birthday. So before I did that, I desperately wanted to be a bombardier on a B-17. That was my only thing I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, because I had never flown more than once or twice. But that's what I wanted to do. So on my own, and I lived in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, near
Mm-hmm.
Gettysburg, and went down on my own to Baltimore, where they had a big enlistment center for the Air Force, and signed up, went in, took all the tests, went through the whole day. They kept telling me, "You're doing fine, you're doing fine." At the end of the day, I was called in by probably a second lieutenant or somebody, and he said, "Well, the bad news is you're colorblind, and we're not going to take you." And I kind of argued the point. I mean, I can tell the difference between red lights and green lights, and those. Well, for being a bombardier and mixing up the colors and stuff, it's so important, and we just can't take the chance. Sorry, young man. So I went back to Chambersburg, and then signed up. I don't know, in a week or so later, when I hit my 18th birthday, I was automatically given a deferment to finish my junior year of high school,
Mm-hmm.
which I was in. And then I got an extension because the high school where I went to, there were quite a few guys in the same boat that I was. So the high school set up a summer school session, and taught the second semester of the senior year, so that if you didn't get called when the fall term started, you could start
Mm-hmm.
the school, which is exactly what I did. I took the second semester, passed it, and in Pennsylvania at the time, if you had you passed 7 semesters, you were eligible for your diploma. So I then started back in the fall, went 3 weeks, and at the end of October, or the end of September, I got saying that on June the 5th, October the 5th, 44, you will go to Fort Meade, Maryland for induction. Started and then went, got on a bus. In fact, I think there were 2 bus loads of us that went to Fort Meade, which was just outside of Baltimore. A very large base at that time, still is one of the main bases in the country. And was inducted there, spent 3 days there. The first day, I remember very well. They took us into the quartermaster corps to get our uniforms and fatigues and all the equipment that we were to get. And a guy standing behind a counter who had never seen a suit before in his life would look at you and say, "Oh, you're a 42." I was a 36. and that's the way we got our uniforms and the fatigues that we were given. We ended up back in the barracks exchanging equipment. Uniforms, because some guys had some guys didn't have anything big enough for them. It was funny. Then later in the day, we had some orientation. They took us out, lined us up, and said, "We're going to teach you how to march." And I wish I had a movie or a picture of that. That had to be the funniest thing in the world, to see all these guys who didn't know left foot from the right foot, and to top that off, the second day that we were there, the buzz went through the camp that Joan Blondell, who was a blonde bombshell in the movies at that time, was going to be on base that afternoon and would be reviewing the troops. And so we went, I can remember that morning, I don't know how many shots we got. They just line you up and you go through the medical building, and there'd be a guy on one side with a shot, a guy over here. I think we got 4 shots within that 5-minute, 10-minute period of, for typhoid, tetanus, all those things. And so in some cases, it really bothered guys. Other guys didn't seem to bother them all, but later that afternoon, we were called out for this dress parade before Joan Blondell and a bunch of generals and stuff. And guys, and they were supposed to be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't think it started until about 5 o'clock. Must have been 95 degrees. The guys were just falling all over. That to this day I can remember that. Guys would be standing beside you and they just collapse, probably from the effects of the shots that they got, plus the heat, plus the nervousness, and all. Half the guys there didn't see Joan Blondell, but she was on the reviewing stand, and then that night while we were having dinner in the barracks, she came around to wave to all the boys and everything. That was supposed to get your morale up, I guess. Very next day, I'll tell you a little funny thing. I had never smoked a cigarette in my life. A very good friend of mine that I ran around with in Chambersburg, double dated, Joe smoked. And he used to offer me cigarettes, and I just never was interested. My dad smoked a pipe, but I just never had any interest. Well, that second night that we were in the barracks, Joe and I went, and we were drafted together and went to meet together. He said, let's go to a movie. So, and of course, lights out in the barracks at 9 o'clock. We went to a movie, came back. It was dark, just lights in the latrine. He said, I need a cigarette. So he got his pack of cigarettes. We went in the latrine. He says, here, you have a cigarette. Well, I thought I was a man, I guess. And okay, hated it. Thought, this is what you've been doing, what? So the next day, I went out over to the Army PX, and I bought a pipe, a package of tobacco. They gave me a box of matches, and later that day, we were to get on a train to go to South Carolina, Camp Croft, South Carolina, outside of Spartanburg, South Carolina, which was a 2-day trip. So I thought I needed something to go accompany me. And all the time, of course, everybody smoked on the train. And I tried to smoke this pipe, and I couldn't keep it lit for anything. I went through a box of matches by the time I got to South Carolina. But that started me on a pipe, and I smoked a pipe, the only guy in my outfit all through the service that ever smoked a pipe. And we'd get cigarette rations, tobacco rations. And I used to have a half a duffel bag full of pipe tobacco. If anybody got any, or was any left, give it to Frank. And I'd just throw it in my duffel bag. Because I really didn't smoke that much and didn't have the opportunity really. But anyway, that was that was the first 2 or 3 days after being inducted. Went to South Carolina, and I was assigned to one replacement depot training center. Joe, another one. He was assigned to the infantry. I was assigned to anti-tank guns, 57 and 37 millimeter anti-tank guns. And so through the 17 weeks of basic, I trained on those two guns. Plus we'd go to the rifle range and shoot machine guns and carbines and M1s and I never became an expert, but I became proficient in I don't know, 5 or 6 different weapons.
Which was your favorite weapon to shoot?
The carbine. It was a little lighter than the M1. I only weighed about 115, 16 pounds when I went in, and I'd hold the M1 out like that, and it'd start to sag on me. But we had basic in Camp Croft. It was a camp that was built just for the war to train students. They had a lot of ground down there in Carolinas and Georgia and that old mud clay, the red clay that they had down there. But we were there from October until February, and most of the time it wasn't too bad. I don't think we ever had any snow while I was there, but it would get very wet and damp and cold, particularly when we go out for training exercises. Most of the training we got was on a 50 or 37 millimeter. They were just bringing the 57s into the picture, and we found out later that the 37 was like a pop gun against German tanks. A 37 wouldn't do anything against a German tank. 57 would. 57 could disable a one, but because we didn't have that many of them, we did most of the training on the 37s. Training exercise, well, 6 days a week, and on Fridays we always had inspection. If your barracks passed inspection, you would get a pass to town, which was Spartanburg, South Carolina, about 15, 20 miles away. They bus us in on buses and bring us back on buses. After a few of those little trips into town, and there was always something going on, that all the churches would have something going on, invite the boys in. Maybe it was just coffee and cookies, or they might have a dance with the girls in the local town. It was, a lot of guys used it as a pickup place. It was where I got my first exposure to how badly blacks were treated, because we would get off the bus in the front, and when we would go into town, they would have separate buses for the black soldiers. They did have them on that camp training. They trained by themselves. We were not intermixed at all. They had their training, we had our training. They had their passes, we had our passes. If you went to the movie, they had a black theater. Couldn't even sit in the same theater with us. Went to church on Sunday morning, went to church. The black guys had their church, we had our church. So we have come a long way, Cody.
Yeah.
Amazingly. But after Joe and I going into town, that's about the only time we would see each other was on the weekend, and sometimes his barracks wouldn't pass or mine wouldn't, and so we didn't get together then. But we would go in, and after 3 or 4 trips into Spartanburg, we decided we were better off staying at the base going to a movie, because you get on the bus to come home at midnight, guys were just smashed. You know, there was an excuse to drink all the beer they could. And guys would just get clobbered. Also, they would drop us at the front of the bus station, and then we would see a bus behind the bus station. That's where they dropped the black guys. And there were separate water fountains for the black guys. They wouldn't even walk on the same sidewalk. I mean, if they saw white troops coming down, we were all buck privates. They'd cross the street or walk out into the street. That's how bad it was. But the 6 days of the week that we trained was just you could really call it a classroom, because we had all kinds of classes in judo and hand-to-hand fighting, using the bayonet. Of course, a lot of rifle range stuff was done. A lot of identification classes where we learned to identify German planes, German tanks, but we also got how to identify Japanese, because when we were in basic training, we didn't know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we got the same thing with Japanese. And if you'd have known you were going to Europe, or if you'd have known you were going to Japan, you probably would have concentrated a little harder. For me, the highlight of basic training every day was the last thing we did was we had about a 2.5 mile, I'm not sure the exact length, but about a 2.5 mile obstacle course. And it was tough. And we had a guy, and to this day I can still remember his name, Sergeant Pepper. Pepper was probably, I don't know, 35, was a military man, had been in the service, was cadre, and he was in charge of our barracks of about, I think the barracks had, we were a 1-floor barracks. We had something like 50 or 60 guys in the barracks, and he was our he was our master. But every day when whereas some of the sergeants and some of the guys in different units would stand back and let their recruits run. And this was, you know, throwing logs, climbing a rope, jumping over water, all that kind of stuff. Pepper was out there every day. And the good part was, if you got back to the barracks for a shower, which was the last thing of the day, if you got there among the first 10 guys, you got hot water. If you didn't get there in the first 10 guys, you probably got cold water. And from the time we started doing that, and it was a personal goal, it was an obsession with me, was to beat Sergeant Pepper. I never beat him in the 16 weeks, 17 weeks of basic training. I mean, he was all muscle. You know, he'd have made 2 of me. But I mean, he was such a fair guy,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody in our barracks respected the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, it was my goal to beat him, and I never beat him. I always managed to be 4th or 5th back into that barracks, and I always had hot water, but I never could beat him. There was It's funny as you look back. Uh, some of the guys that you remember, and I remember quite a few of them, maybe not so many by name, but there was one guy by the name of Joe O'Shaughnessy from Philadelphia. And Joe was, I think he had probably come from a very wealthy family, had apparently never done anything for himself. And he was hopeless. He really, you know, we had sandbaggers and greenbacks and guys that didn't carry their weight. He just didn't know how. I mean, he was just inept. And after flunking barracks test a couple times and not getting to go and pass, we all pitched in, and we would help him make his bed, get his foot locker straightened up, and help us to get past inspection. And if we wouldn't have, we'd have never gone on pass. But Joe was, I often wondered what happened to him when he got into combat. I can't imagine he lived more than a day. We were, one specific time we were going through an infiltration course where they were firing live ammunition over us. I don't know how far up. They said, don't put your head up. It may have been a little higher than that, but there's always stray rounds and stuff. But we were going through it one day, and Joe was alongside of me, and all of a sudden he just panicked, and he was all ready to stand up, and he'd have been sliced too. There was a guy on the other side of him, grabbed one of his arms, I grabbed the other arm, and we literally forced him to the ground and were able to pull him through. And this you went through mud and all kinds of stuff with barbed wire right over top of you, and the machine gun bullets going 6 inches, who knows, 8 inches over your head, and we got him through that course. It just happened that one day that I'm aware of, but he just happened to panic that day. And as I say, I often wonder what might have happened to him. Probably became a general. But
yeah,
that was pretty much basic training. Early in February, I think, I don't know the dates exactly, but the first week or so, I know I was home on my birthday on the 10th of February, and got a 7-day pass once we had completed basic training. So we went home, wore our dress uniform, and paraded around town. Saw a couple of gals I'd been dating, and just sort of showed off for the neighbors. And all the neighbors would come in and see it, and it was you were kind of treated like a hero in your hometown.
Yeah.
Oh, doing basic training, I was doing pretty well, and all the tests and everything that we did, certainly in my running and everything. And I was nominated to go to officers training school, which had I gone and had graduated, I would have come out as a second lieutenant, and which they called 90-day wonders. When they found out that I had not completed my senior year of high school, they said you have to have a high school diploma to be an officer, and so that was something that was shot down for me. But when I got to Hampton Roads, we pretty much knew we were going to Europe, but we didn't know where, whether it would be England or North Africa or where. And I was put on a Liberty boat with about 500 other guys, and we were in a huge convoy. They said there were over 300 ships in the convoy. A lot of them were Navy destroyers and escorts that were escorting us across the Atlantic because of the Germans were out with their subs, particularly once we got into the Mediterranean. And I remember that the trip over was nothing. We every day we had to get up on deck and do some calisthenics to keep us in reasonable shape. Guys served. We got called out. I think I served KP a couple times. We helped the Navy provide meals, and we'd cut up the potatoes and all that kind of stuff. And drew guard duty a couple times. Now, what you guard on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, I don't know. But it kept us busy. And of course, actually, we were all assigned to a gun and so forth in case we did get attacked. We had a couple of run-ins in the Mediterranean, and on the morning of April 1st, and I remember thinking this is an April Fool's joke. We got caught in it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden there was all kinds of guns going off and everything. Everybody was told to go topside, and went up and came up out of the quarters that I was in, and all you can see is the sky lit by literally thousands of guns firing, and we had been raided by some German airplanes, and they shot down one, and we actually saw it fluttering down into the water. A ship near us got hit by a bomb. I have no idea how bad it was, but did get hit there. We went on into the Mediterranean. They split off half the convoy of about 150 ships that went to North Africa. The other 150 were going to either Italy or Sicily. And my particular ship went into Sicily because we later found out they couldn't have all these ships standing off the harbor at Naples because the Germans had destroyed so much of the Naples harbor that they could only dock 3 or 4 ships at a time. So we spent a couple days on board ship in Sicily, and then proceeded into Sicily. And I can remember getting off the ship, and after 26 days of being on a ship, it was tough to get your land legs back again. Because we've been wobbling back and forth on the ship, and what became very natural to us, and then to get on land where there was no give was quite strange. I don't know what I expected when I landed in Italy. Brass band, I don't know, but we didn't get anything. We were just disembarked as quickly as possible. Were put on Army vehicles and taken up to north of Naples, some miles.
Do you remember like any specific, like as you were like leaving after that 7 days with your family? What did your parents tell you? I mean, what were those interactions like?
It was, and I don't know that I was close to my sisters, but we'd always been good friends. But I think they were happy to have a brother in the service. I mean, it was just the thing to do. I mean, you were supposed to be in the service. It wasn't, do you want to go or anything. I mean, I'm sure there were guys who didn't want to go. But in my case, I never had any feeling that I shouldn't go. I never had a feeling that I wasn't going to come back. All through the war, all through the time in combat in Italy, I never questioned that I wasn't going to come back. I was there, I was in the middle of it, and I was going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way I felt about it. My parents had a little flag in the window that had a star on that indicated that they had a son or somebody in the service. If you had one of those flags with a gold star, it meant that you had lost a son or daughter. And they were very proud of that. I remember when I left to go back, I'm sure there was a tear in my mother's eye and my dad's eye, but it was, as I say, they knew I had to go.